immunotherapy lab. Now, I think, at that time, even now, it's quite rare to work at two labs because it's a very chaotic schedule to balance. My experience was at UW Medical Center. I was working from morning to afternoon, and then I would probably take a few minutes break and then go to a different lab and work from there all the way to like 10 or 11 p.m. That's just a matter of working at two labs. But what that did for me was that really fast tracked my knowledge. It was something that I compressed almost kind of like two years of learning in just a year and a half. And so I think, a lot of those long nights not only gave me the knowledge of seeing projects and experiments from a scientist hat at, a high level, but also I had that experience of working in basements till 11 p.m. or oftentimes much later than that because the experiment needs to go on. So I kind of had both of those hats, both the management high level hat, but also the person who actually did work at the bench. Now, there did come a point where, because I was so involved in the research, I obviously, found pain points or problems in my own research that I wanted to solve. And there was a point where I realized that the data management when I was doing research was so inefficient that it was actually costing me more time to manage my data than to actually do the science. And so this science component was almost kind of like lost. And, that growing pain, kind of built up to a point where it was unbearable. And I was like, all right, there has to be an easier solution to this, right? You're doing cutting edge cancer research, but we're using such traditional data documentation practices. And so that point was when I actually was thinking like, all right, I want to build something that solves this problem that I have. And then and someone came to mind immediately, and that was my good friend, Jin. And I've known Jin for a very long time. I've known him for 12 years. We actually go all the way back to 9th grade English class. Now, he's a software engineer by trade, so he knows how to build things, engineer things. And so we worked on something, this problem, the solution to the problem that I was experiencing. And we hacked together this program in about 2 weeks. I still remember like those 14 days were very critical. We hacked together something and we pitched it to my boss at the time. And the results was really surprising. My boss at the time in the research lab, he started using our program instead of a program that he was paying thousands of dollars for. And so that was kind of like interesting because we were like, all right, it must be solving like a real problem, I guess. And then from there, we then got intro to a few other people. And we didn't really think about it much. We just kind of kept on iterating on that solution that we were building. Now, fast forward a few months, there's a realization where Jen and I were like, all right, what's the next step for this program, for the solution? And what we slowly learned was, all right, this is kind of what we can call a startup in a way. So, I typically like to say that very early beginnings of our company was quite organic. It was a problem we discovered. It was a solution that we built and we pitched it to customers. We just didn't know it was called a startup at that time. So we worked on that, several months later. Another pivotal thing was that then I wanted to verify if this pain point or if this problem was the same problem in industry as well. So this was kind of all in the academic context, but we know that in academic context and the industry context, there's different personas, there's different customers, there's different even markets as well. So, that was a time where I started thinking about, transitioning away from the two labs I was working with and going into more of biotech, more of big pharma. Now, conveniently also at the same time, I was taking a few classes in entrepreneurship, and that was a really good fundamental knowledge building. It was also kind of the same time I was wrapping up with my master's. So things were kind of coming to a close on the academic side that I could make that jump into corporate. So made the jump into corporate. I ended up going to Juno Therapeutics. And at Juno Therapeutics, I don't think really surprisingly, but the pain point was exactly the same. You know, the pain that I experienced, that my principal investigator experienced at the time, was the same thing that people in billion-dollar companies were struggling with. In fact, there was many times where the entire team had to actually take 3 weeks just to manage all of their data so that they could report to upper management how many freezers they had to buy for the next quarter, or like how far behind were they on space, or hey, we don't have any more space for experiments, we have to purchase more. And this was all manually. And so that just didn't make sense. And so slowly, the problem statement started shifting, the solution started getting bigger, the market obviously got bigger as we dived into, what's the fundamental problem here. So that was super interesting, but we were just starting with corporate. Jen was actually in corporate for quite a while, long before me, because I was in school, but I was still in corporate, kind of taking in what that industry experience was like. Now, of course, there was a time that soon I became full time. But what's interesting to mention is when I was at Juno Therapeutics, it really actually felt like I worked at 3 companies. So I was there, when Juno was being acquired, or was acquired by another bigger company called Celgene, and almost at the phase where Celgene was then being acquired by Bristol Myers Squibb. So I was able to see the data management practices of many companies, not just that one company. So it really felt like working at 2 or 3 different companies, the culture shift. Now, of course, there came to the point where I think a pivotal point when Jen and I were working in corporate, and this was not an overnight shift. This wasn't like an overnight switch. It was a point where it's like Jen and I both felt that our time spent in corporate was better spent working on the startup. And this was an interesting dynamic, because I think we both wanted to go faster. We could see early traction with customers. We could see that our problem, that the solution was solving a real problem that was verified in both academia and industry. And we realized that it was only a stepping stone. So there's actually a lot of more steps to take. In fact, if we didn't knock out the first stepping stone, we can't go up. But how can you do that if you are just only able to work 20 hours after work each day on the startup? And also, after work hours, it's incredibly hard because you're already kind of exhausted from a day's work. So really, those hours that you're spending on startup are already kind of the hours that are the most tiring. So it really became to the point where it's like, all right, if we hit these metrics, we're going to quit full time, or we're going to quit our full-time job and do full-time Gmod. Or if we do these metrics, we're going to do that. Now, I would say the breaking point was when we started to work with interns. And this was how we were so incredibly scrappy during our pre-seed stage. Essentially, we were at a stage where we wanted to get as many people on, great talent on, but also be cost effective, because, Jen and I, we were pretty early in our corporate careers. So we didn't have too much disposable capital to spend on a side project. And one of the things for, I guess, for audience members who are working, on a startup or thinking of an idea at the pre-seed stage, is we decided to have this intern cohort model. So what I mean by that is we hired a lot of student interns from University of Washington, Seattle, to help us on our project. We wrapped it as a 3-month unpaid internship that essentially they can, balance with their schoolwork, but also provide us with good help. And we optimized this infrastructure to a point where we were able to have 8 to 10 interns on our team, not FTEs, but they were just on our team. Oh, and by the way, no one was getting paid at this point. It was just all free work, even the founders. So we optimize our internal team infrastructure to onboard these, and we worked it to such a great point where our team was even on average, it was about like 16 to 18 people at any given time. And we had these like crazy cohorts of interns just like coming in and coming out, and the work output was insane. And each quarter, we probably only spent about like $3,000 to $4,000. That was on logistics, and many of the interns were full time. So that's how we were. That's how Jin and I were scrappy in a way in terms of like saving the financials. Of course, it was a lot of management. We had to get work done too, but that was the jumping point. The jumping point was we have a ton of interns who believe in our mission, who's working for us, and we love working with the team, but we still have a full-time job on the side. What does that say about us, right? And also at the same time, we were crushing our own metrics. So it was a pretty clear decision to jump full-time. So we left our corporate jobs actually not too long ago, just late last year in October. And when we left the jobs, it was kind of like a realization moment, which is like, all right, things really have to get started. The real enemy is kind of time in a way, and of course, like how much money is in the bank. So we continued with the intern cohort model because that was a cost efficient way, and we could get triple, sometimes maybe like 4x our work output. Now I would say there were some like team dynamics that helped made this super simple. And how Jen and I run the team, we like to be more of like a tactical. We like to give like tactical advice. So if anyone is thinking of leveraging something like this, like an intern cohort model, which really is a win-win situation, there are a few things that I would suggest. People, I think at the early stage, we obviously worried so much about the cap table for good reason still. But we use software, for example, like Slicing Pie or Gus Launch. I think those were things that just kept this super clean because we had so many people rotating in and out. And of course, the cohort was something that was beneficial. So each quarter, we would rotate out the interns. We would have specific timelines of the projects we would do. Of course, in-person working was incredibly important. So, there was a point where we wanted to foster more of like an in-person team because we were starting to get to that size where remote work was kind of weird. And this was pre-pandemic. Nowadays, it's actually normal for remote work. But back then it was almost kind of like, I don't know, like a stigma or whatever. But, in-person was more preferred because you could have an office space, interns, they could like come in and, get like free food and free snacks. So we shifted around office space. Before we got our first office space, we were at the Collective, which is this co-working space. And we basically would like rotate interns like in and out because we were past the capacity. After that didn't work out because we were trying to save on we tried to maximize our runway as long as we could without paying for actual office rent space. So we did this at this co-working space. It only cost us $117 a month. And then after that didn't work out because we were getting a few red flags with too many people coming in. Then we started shifting to my apartment amenities. And then funny story, like I also almost got evicted because we had too many team members working at my apartment. And so when I almost got evicted, I was like, all right, this must be the final step for us to, actually get like office space. So we got this very small office space in Pioneer Square, and that worked out really well. And then 2 months later, COVID hit, and then, we weren't able to work there anymore. And, I would say the short time that we were at the office, I think, surprisingly, it had a lot of memories of, like the beginnings of our startup. Because that was one of the times where it was very early on. And I think the team dynamics at an early stage is incredibly important. Like hiring the right people, having the right core team members is very crucial. And it was, Jin, myself, two other core team members, three other core team members actually. And I would say, like, I don't want to brush over, the importance of hard work, but um, when we were architecting the product, working with customers, doing sales, I would say it was very frequent that we would, work the 40 hour because we were all full time. And there was times where like things that you just can't leave, you just got to work. And so I remember, I think like maybe like 2 to 3 times like every week, Jen and I and a few other members, we would just stay at the office till like 4 to 5 a.m. like on the whiteboard, drawing out product design, talking about like, constraints, requirements, competitors, all that stuff. And like that was extremely memorable because that was kind of like the typical like movie startup type of thing. But it was like a very like hacker mindset, and everyone was just like actually enjoying the work. It didn't feel like work. It was like something fun, something exciting. And like if this was a fun story, Jen and I, we stayed at the office so often till like 4 to 5. I think Jen even one time like slept in his car and I just like went to work the next day. Yeah, with the shower facilities there. But anyways, like there was a fun story. It's like we even became close with the janitor who had 2 a.m. shifts that was cleaning the desk. And the janitor, we became really close with him because, we were just staying so late. But I want to stress, it's not the aspect of like staying late. It's like doing a startup is really hard. And you need to have people, you need to have colleagues and allies who can be there with you on that journey. It's not a solo man job. I don't think I could have done it at all without, a co-founder and also a great team. So I think that that's the real takeaway. And also another takeaway is, we were part of this program called Venture Out. And Venture Out was incredibly helpful in both the networking aspect, as well as helping us practice how do we start, raising capital. Like, what's the next step? It's not just building out a product and, spending hundreds of hours if, it's not something that's scalable or something that's not venture scalable. So that was one of the important transitions that we started working with. And Venture Out, for those of you guys who are at the early pre-seed stage, I think Sean and Ken are super great. They really, it's a program that really is, it's a tactical program. They act as kind of like a co-founder as a service. So if you're a solo founder, and you really need another person to kind of like vet through the ideas, the business, the market, what's the value proposition, what's the pain, pricing, all that stuff. They really come in as a great strategic. So we knew that we had to learn this entrepreneur stuff and business stuff at a fast pace, which kind of brought memories back of when I was working at Two Labs. I had to catch up to speed. So similarly for entrepreneurship, fundraising, investors, dynamics, I had to catch up to speed. So Jen and I, we attended those programs, that added, I think, another 10 hours of work weekly. I think we were at like 70, 75 hours for at least like a good like 6-7 months right after we quit full time. And we would just go up to South Lake Union because that's where the in-person sessions were. And that was incredibly good. And I would say the main takeaway from that was the networking aspect. So networking, before I got into kind of more of the entrepreneurial side, networking was something that was very foreign to me because I was a classical bench scientist just working in the lab. I wouldn't have to go to networking events, social events, talk with like, leave the day with like 15 business cards. That was not something I had to do. That was just simply not something I was even like trained to do. So I didn't understand those social dynamics, but this program definitely helped me. One extreme example, which to this date, I think is still the best networking experience I've ever had, was we were it was like a 3-day endeavor, 2 or 3 day endeavor, and we met over 50 people. And each person, Jen and I, we met 50 people together. Each person we had like only 15 to 20 minutes or so, and we had to pitch our company like 50 times. And that was extremely good practice, because I do think, like the more practice you have, the more smoother you can tell that story. And telling a story is really important. It's like, I would say investors, mentors, advisors, typically for entrepreneurs, and kind of speaking to all other entrepreneurs, um, because it's so hard, sometimes it's also kind of like crazy why you would leave stability for something that is very, very difficult and has a high chance of failure. But so, like telling that story of why you got into startups in the first place is important, and that networking really helped. So that program was about 3 months, and of course, it kind of like acts like YC or Techstars in some way. There's like a demo day at the end. We presented investors, and that was in March of this year. So that was also when COVID was there. And I'll talk a little bit about the impact of COVID for us. When we were so essentially the office space. We were still at the office space. We were wrapping up with this program, Venture Out, and COVID was also hitting. But essentially what that meant for us is that all of the in-person outreach we were doing to labs and scientists, that also had to stop. We essentially had to pivot our outreach entirely from in-person to virtual. And that's a different dynamic, I would say. I think for any vertical, like it's a very hard pivot. So we went back to the drawing board. It was back to, like the late nights at the office, and essentially we scoped on, what is some good go-to-market ways? What are some good ways to get people to join your platform, even without meeting them in person, right? And that's really hard. It's like, how do you get a person from a video call to join your platform, and they know that you're a startup that may or may not succeed? Like, how do you do that? And then for us, we had an additional barrier. It's like, how do you do that, and plus get them to use your platform and put their proprietary data, their scientific data, their life's work on your platform? So we had that like extra barrier. And I would say that those were the challenges that Jen and I we had to think out very hard. But in a nutshell, what we ended up coming out is we can help labs better manage their data, which was our fundamental thesis. Provide the value back to the scientists, and we could make it so that it was almost automatic, almost like seamless. So what we came up with was this very interesting data migration part. We knew that scientists, when we presented to scientists, even in the first call, scientists, they quickly get what we are doing because we're solving directly for pain points. Now we wanted to take it to the next level where it's, all right, you know what the product is. Let's get your data, your existing data, onto our platform. And so that for us was kind of like the customer also having skin in the game. And that was incredibly important. And so we wrapped our sales around that aspect, and it worked out really well. We were able to go from all in-person sales to virtual in about 3 to 4 weeks without really like a severe dip. In fact, actually, when we rolled that out, this new sales approach, our traction actually grew very quickly. It grew by about 3 to 4x, and we were at a point where I remember that we couldn't reach out anymore, because if we reached out more, then we wouldn't actually be able to have a fast enough turnaround that we could complete the customer's request. So we were essentially capped at our bandwidth. And so that was then at the point where like, all right, what's the solution? Well, it's hire more interns. So we hired more interns to help us with a lot of this manual lifting. and that really worked out good. So, spring quarter of this year, as well as summer quarter, which was just, last month, we wrapped up our very last intern cohort. And so, on the customer side, it's been great. Now, with this traction, I think what the takeaway was, it's great. It's great. I would say it's great solving real problems at a very large scale, but we always knew that we needed outside capital to scale the product. And our product was technically demanding. We're building software that scientists doing cutting edge research are supposed to use. So there's a high bar that we have to hit in terms of the feasibilities and features and capabilities that our software needs to reach. So we knew we needed venture capital. And essentially that was kind of like, on me to raise the round. And, we started actually not thinking that we were going to raise that much. We were originally just thinking of raising 600 to 700K on a convertible note. And, we had initial angels and a few commitments, but after the practice of going through multiple pitches through Venture Out, I think the storytelling is really important, and also driving that momentum is really important. So we were introduced to a great venture capital in Silicon Valley. Really, it was a good fit from the get-go. We really resonated with both the director there as well as their mission. And so it was a good fit. And from there, we raised way more than we expected. We then, opened a 1.5 million seed round. And a month ago or so, we closed that round. And in fact, we generated so much momentum that we actually raised oversubscribed to about 1.7 million. And this was compared to our 600K convertible note, this was a 1.7 priced round. And so, I think that process was very interesting. I still often remember my first time networking in February or March, which really isn't that long ago, to now. I think that progression is just more of like, I think, working with great teams, some degree of luck and just really putting that work, showing some of the business metrics really is important. And the power of practice, that's incredibly important. So here we are today, now really at a new chapter. It's kind of transitioning out from a pre-seed round to a venture round, and I think it's a different set of challenges. It's really proving, achieving product market fit, and each company is going to be at a different stage. I don't think all seed companies are going to have the exact same set of challenges. There are some things that are going to be consistent. For us, we have a lot of things, I think, exciting things in mind that we're going to work towards. Of course, the pandemic, the virtual ecosystem is the new normal. I don't think we'll have an office until maybe like at least March of next year. So a lot of things, work dynamic, things are shifting. For us, because we just closed our round, we're also on on the lookout for great people to join our team as well. So specifically hiring for engineers. And with that, I think, I will pass it back to Penghai, and then see if maybe we want to start with Q&A, if you guys want to have any more questions on that journey.
I actually have a question that so you graduate and start a Genemod, right? And you have no experience the management experience before, and then you start to manage a group of like 20 or people, or even more, right? So how do you feel? Like what's the do you feel like lost sometime, or like even get some terrible feeling if your team work doesn't work that very well?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely people who love management, and there's also people who prefer kind of just like doing their own work. I would say I did not have management experience in my academic and corporate work,
Mm.
but what my superpower was, I believe, is I always like to plan ahead. Like I always like to plan ahead. Like, hey, what's my next step? And that type of, I would say, thinking, I was able to translate that to management, because I could also see, like, what are the next things that we need to do, and how do we get to that point? How do we execute? And for me, that translated into working with great people. Specifically, interns was a way to train those skills. Now, of course, early on, when Jin and I, we hired a lot of interns, we were still kind of learning too, right? But
Mm.
we're working with student interns. So as Jin and I, we became better managers. I think also interns probably got a better experience too, working for us.
Cool. Cool. And also, like, I'm very curious, like, what's motivate you to work that hard? Like, and you don't quite care about other things than this like um, objective Genemod.
Yeah. At some core, I think it's really just, believing in the mission, but also that support network. I'm extremely grateful, for my co-founder Jin, as well as the team, that we were able to also be kind of like mental support, for each other. And it's important, I think, to have that like relationship. I've known Jin for so long. We were we are very close friends before becoming business partners. And I think that bond was able to help us translate to go through the hard times as
Mm.
well as the good times too.
Mm.
Um, and so, to my earlier point, it really didn't feel like work, and I'm not going to recommend like a bad lifestyle of just like, like working hard is not going to like, uh, like, like hit certain milestones. Nothing magical is going to happen. I think it's really just focusing on the right things, building up the team, being scrappy, and
Yeah.
being able to pivot. Like at the early stage, startups, like one of the most biggest advantages that startups have at the early stage is their agility, or their agility to take in feedback and pivot when it's needed.
Got it. Got it. Or is like do you have a like a very um do you have a life goal like so, and what you are doing now is actually kind of like meet your fulfill your life goal, or do you
Yeah.
do that?
So I mean, I jumped around a lot before the startup, right? Like working in labs, working in corporate. I even worked for the government at some point too. But I will say, absolutely, the startup is something that we're going to be working on for the next few years, uh, if not longer. So we're in it for the long run.
Cool. Cool. Here's a question from one of the audience that he's really curious about this is a challenge on the project management while working with the interns. Working interns is quite a should be a flexible thing, and interns can go and leave anytime. You don't have, the company and the
Yeah.
intern doesn't have a strong boundary between each other, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I would say this intern cohort was by far one of the just doing this intern cohort for Jin and I, it was kind of like a, like a really amped up boot camp on how to be a manager, because
Mm.
student interns, they are green to an extent, right? Like they're still taking classes. Certainly I always thought back, to when I was like a junior or senior, I
Mm.
probably couldn't have done the stuff that they are doing now at our company. Um, so I had to put ourselves in our shoes, but importantly, because we had such a, I would say like quick turnover rate, because we operate on a quarter cycle. Sometimes we did extend interns to work multiple quarters, which is great. But because we had that, the infrastructure is really important. So we leveraged a lot of consumer professional tools. We use Slack, Teams, Jira. This infrastructure was really important. We even had this onboarding checklist that we would knock out for new cohorts. And so what the takeaway was, Jen and I, we wanted to operate as closely as if we were a corporate company, even though we were still at the pre-financing stage. And that works out extremely well. It works out both for the company, but it also works out for the intern, because the intern, they want to get that experience. They want to get something that is representative of what they would work at, once they graduate, right?
Yeah. It's really important to build up the pipeline, the process, like to formalize the whole thing, right?
Right, exactly.
Do you have more questions, audience? You can type your questions in QA, or you can raise your hands up. I can unmute you too. Okay, here another question, that follow-up question. So what are the background of these interns? What kind of background do you prefer? Computer science or biological, medical background?
Yeah, I mean, it varies for every company. I think it's, of course, the interns that you need at that specific time, ready to reach milestones or your next goal. So for us, because we're a software company, most of our efforts was to source computer science interns. So we've had a lot of computer science interns join our team, as well as also other majors too. UX is super important. So I would say, HCDE, I think informatics. We've also had business majors too, business, biochem majors. I think, because we're in the software space, but also life sciences, it does have a pretty wide reach.
Or you can share like what kind of people you try to hear now, like you want to hear full-time or part-time or interns, like what's your company's status now? Can you share?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to pre-financing. Jen and I, we were able to spend a little bit more time on management and to increase our bandwidth, right? To outsource to student interns. But we always knew that right when we closed our round, we would have to scale down to a more smaller team, to more like a tiger team, almost kind of like back in our office days. And the reason is because the time is always better spent, I think, working on the business rather than managing at the early stage. So right now we are a team of 7 people, and that is working out extremely well. We're back to hacking. It's kind of back to those office days, which is great. I think that's what Jen and I, we fundamentally also enjoy doing. But we also at the same time are looking for FTEs to join our team. We're kind of in that prime position where we are looking for the 3rd or 4th founding, early software engineer to join our team. So senior engineers, I think. So we have an open role for a senior engineer that we're actively hiring for right now.
Okay, awesome. I think there's no more questions. Oh, okay, we got a question from Alex. Do you hear high school interns who has done well in programming and want to get some real work experience? High school interns.
We've considered high school interns. We don't get too many applicants. The main job portal that we use is called Handshake. So most of our applicants are college.
Okay. Okay, and then how do they contact you? Search you in LinkedIn or?
Yeah, please. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. And reach out directly to me. Again, I would say the power of networking is incredibly important. So I'm always happy to network and talk more and kind of give my 2 cents on my experiences and the lows and highs. I'm happy to always share.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for the sharing, Jacob. And I think I will send you the questions like later if I get more. Seems that we have another questions, but I think today is a great sharing, and thank you for all the precious information here. And
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me. All right. Take care, guys.
Yeah, take care. Bye, audience. We'll see you next week.